My name is Henrik Nordahl. I'm the Director of Evaluation at the new independent department at Norec. As of the 1st of January this year, we took over the responsibility of evaluating the Norwegian Development Corporation from the evaluation department hosted previously by Norfund. To do this, we have recruited a team of global experts bringing in high-quality expertise and experience across key areas in evaluation and development cooperation. Today, I'm very happy to be here to launch the evaluation of Norfund's investments in renewable energy. Norfund is an important actor. They invest in sustainable businesses in developing countries on commercial terms to promote economic growth, job creation, and climate impact where these investments would not otherwise take place. In 2022, Norfund was also tasked with managing the Climate Investment Fund, aimed at reducing or avoiding greenhouse gas emissions by investing in renewable energy in developing countries. They have been evaluated twice before, in 2003 and 2015. This time around, the purpose has been to assess the impact, sustainability, and efficiency of Norfund's renewable energy investments while extracting strategic lessons for future improvements. It is worth noting that this evaluation was actually commissioned by the evaluation department at Norad, and we want to really recognize and appreciate the superb work they did on it. And we're happy to have several members of the former evaluation department here with us today, and we will hear more from them later as well. We hope that this report and seminar will create a space for knowledge sharing and facilitate discussions among you present here today, either physically or online, and in the broader public sphere. The agenda for today is as follows. KPMG will take us through the evaluation methodology and key findings. Norfund will present their comments. Javier will share the recommendations that the evaluation department in Norad provided to the Foreign Ministry. The Foreign Ministry will share their official comments, and we will have a panel debate with distinguished participants. And lastly, a Q&A session with questions from the audience via the QR code on your tables. As you can see, we have an exciting event ahead of us. And now we will start off by welcoming to the stage the team leader for the evaluation, Mr. Thomas Fuglesnes. Here is the clicker.
Thanks. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Thomas Fuglesnes. I'm an executive director at KPMG Development Advisory Services based here in Oslo. Although I'm not the only one who's been working on this report, there's quite a big team behind it. I'm not sure if anyone has opened the report since it was launched yesterday, but you can see the names. And with me, I just want to point out today we have Lars and Zubair, two of the co-authors. So if anyone has questions, reach out to them or to me during or after our discussions. I'm not sure if you've seen, but the report is quite dense, quite long, we've been told. So I think it's hard to summarize everything. So this will be a bit of a teaser. I've been given limited time, so I probably will be running a bit quickly. So I encourage you to go to the report if there are certain subjects that you're particularly interested in. But I will give you a little bit about the background, and then I will walk you through some of the key findings that we like to highlight for the discussions today. Just so that we're all on the same page, I think most of you I recognize and you know Norfund well, but we have looked at basically two portfolios at Norfund. So traditionally, Norfund has the development impact mandate. That's what Norfund has been doing since it was created in 1997, and is focusing on supporting developing countries, supporting developing countries develop its private sector and creating jobs. And among the interventions for Norfund, renewable energy has and is one of the key sectors that it's investing in. I think till 2020, about half of Norfund's investments was in renewable energy. Today, it's about a third. And then in 2002, the Climate Investment Fund was introduced in Norway, and it's managed by Norfund. And the focus of this fund is really to avoid and reduce emissions, greenhouse gas emissions in developing countries. Norfund is intervening in renewable energy sector and kind of using the setup it has for its development mandate, also for the Climate Investment Fund. For all of you, Norfund is development finance institutions. Although it's getting subsidies from the government through MFA and the annual budgets, it is tasked to basically make investments in companies and funds, and it earns profits, which it then can reinvest in new companies and investments. If you look at the period here, if you look all the way from the beginning till today, you see an evolution that investments sort of started out in large platform companies or large companies that then would make investments such as Statkraft International, later on SN Power and Globelec. And with the sellout of SN Power a few years ago, there's a lot other also investees. But basically over the period, there has been about 73 investees and investments under the development impact mandate, and there are 12 under the climate investment mandate. If you look at when we finished the data collection, basically we use data up till December 2023. You can see the portfolio, a renewable energy portfolio at that time was quite heavily concentrated in India and South Africa. And I think at the time there were 40 investees under the development impact mandate and 12 under the climate investment mandate. Just to recap our objectives, we basically use the OECD DAC framework, but we focus mainly on results, outcome and impacts, sustainability of investments, and efficiency, and less so on relevance and coherence, which you normally see. And all the questions, you can find them at annex to the report, so if you're curious about that. In terms of methodology, we looked at less so at the mandates that were given, but we looked at how the board and the management is translating the mandate into strategies for renewable energy. Then we looked at how the management and the renewable energy department has translated that into investments and the portfolio. So we looked at the entire portfolio. And then we also did case studies in 3 countries. We went to Madagascar, South Africa, and India to have more in-depth conversations with stakeholders and beneficiaries. The methodology is mixed method methodology. You can look more about that in the report. And the period under review was from 2015, basically from the last evaluation of Norfund that covered the whole of Norfund. And we looked through 2023, and it covers 68 development impact mandate investments, as well as 12 SIM investments. Just in terms of the findings, so the report basically focusing on results and sustainability and efficiency. So I will give you some highlights here. Key takeaways from you are mainly focusing on results and efficiency. In terms of the results, I think we found that the strategies have been quite conducive for delivering on a mandate. The strategies have evolved over time, and they're becoming better. And as you can see, the strategies are kind of identifying key target countries, instruments and segments that Norfund is supporting, as well as technologies. And we have overall found those quite conducive for achieving the mandate and the objectives set for both the development impact mandates and SIM. So if you look at just in terms of the ambitions, just to clarify, you can see for the development impact, its focus is really on installing energy production capacity, and also focus in later years on access for end users such as households or informal and small businesses in the intervention areas. And then avoidance is the sort of key ambition behind the climate investment mandate. Overall, I think as I said, in a way, if you look at what Norfund has been reported, we find that over the period of review, I think Norfund is a lot better at reporting on results today than it was earlier. And it's also, in terms of the target set in general, has been overachieving it. So for instance, if you're looking at the last strategy period, 2019-2022, 5.2 gigabyte against an ambition of 5 gigawatt renewable energy was installed. Also, Norfund is reporting to overachieve its access targets. And the climate investment mandate is also well on way, and in fact is reported to actually overachieve its target already. That being said, though, I think it's important, and it took certainly me some time to understand when you read in the reporting. And Norfund is reporting Norfund is relying on mainly on the reporting from its investees. So when Norfund reports its results, it's not necessarily directly linked to the contribution from Norfund. So for instance, if we look at the renewable or in the access data from Norfund, I think here it's reported that the numbers don't fully add up because they keep on moving all the time. But in the annual report, it was reported in 2001 that it was 4 million. The main driver behind that is a fund called Access to Clean Power Fund, operated by Responsibility. And they report that they have connected to 2.9 million households. So if you dig a bit behind and you actually look at the investment, what is going on? It's an investment of 160 million USD, of which Norfund is only contributing 12 million. In fact, there's a lot of other DFIs, and the fund is also receiving grant funding from bilateral and foundation partners. So I think that's a sort of an area that we have pointed out that Norfund can work on. It's to find better ways maybe of how to adjust or how to include attribution in its reporting. Another issue that we have also found, and I think, I'm not sure if there's anyone from the press, but there's certainly owner and decision maker here. Norfund is quite straight in his reporting. Is generally reporting input data as opposed to outcome delivered. What do we mean by that? Is that a lot of the reporting is focused on what Norfund has committed and financed. So, for instance, if it's saying today that we have contributed to 14.7, I think, million tons avoided CO2 emissions. These are sort of, many of them are planned investments. So what we're trying to encourage Norfund to is to maybe focus more on actual results and sort of moving up and reporting for for instance, the emissions when they actually have occurred as opposed to upfront. But it's true in the reporting, they are in footnotes explaining this. And I think here it's a good example where maybe this is clear to Norfund, but I think in the press and also for decision makers, this becomes a bit unclear. If you see this, here is, I think it's a budget proposition, where the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is actually reporting that these things have been achieved and they're not actually financed and forthcoming. And also here you can see if you're looking at the annual report, Norfund is, it appears that if Norfund has overachieved its targets already, which is true if all its investments are realized and are commissioned and are operational. But a more realistic result right now is probably 2.2 million tons. So there's, although the reporting has improved, I think there are areas for Norfund to make the reporting even better and clearer. In terms of additionality, I'm not sure if any one of you are really familiar with additionality, but the mandate for Norfund is not just to install energy capacity or provide access and avoid emissions. The mandate also says that Norfund should make investments that could not otherwise be made. So that's an important element. So basically, what does that mean? Well, in many instances, the private sector perceive the risk to be too high, and then you have development finance institutions such as Norfund that can go in and make the investments. So in a way, if Norfund ends up doing investments that the private sector could have made, you could say that maybe the results shouldn't be counted. And it's a key concept for DFIs. We have written a lot about it in the report. I think we tried to pull together the literature. I think what's important to take away, it's not very easy for institutions such as Norfund to assess what could have happened. It's not easy to prove that it is additional, but it's something that that they are working with. There is also an example here I'm not going to go through, but if you read quickly, it kind of illustrates a bit what do we mean by Norfund being additional and sort of crowding in and not out the private sector, for instance. As I said, so at Norfund today, basically in terms of additionality and making sure that they're doing the right investments, there are two strategies. So one at the investment level, Norfund in 2019 introduced an additionality calculator, which has 10 criteria, proxies for additionality that's used by the investment teams, management, and also the board to make sound judgments about additionality. We have found that system to be quite good. We have, I think, pointed out a few weaknesses and areas that can be worked on. But overall, it sort of allows management and board to sort of make good judgment calls and also exceptions if those are needed. But especially for the development impact mandate, there are also these top-down safeguards in a way. So at portfolio level, the board has put in place proxies for additionality to make sure that Norfund is adding value. And you can see some of them here. For instance, for the development impact mandate, the strategy says that a third of the investments should be in least developed countries. Half of it should be in sub-Saharan Africa, although South Africa is one of those countries. And also a focus on using equity. And the reason for that is twofold. One is that Norfund is well positioned to do it because it's receiving a lot of grant funding from the government of Norfund, but it's also one of the sources of funding that the investees are struggling to mobilize in the private market. So in overall, I think our assessments, and please go and read in the report, is that a lot has happened. It's improved. We feel maybe that especially for the climate investment mandate, there's room for improvement, and there are risks that investments are not additional. And we feel that that's an area that should be looked at going forward. Just in terms of sustainability, so that you understand, we didn't look at the sort of exposed long-term sustainability of the results. The focus was on assessing whether Norfund had good systems for ensuring upfront that the right things were put in place to make investments sustainable. And I think we generally found that towards engaging the stakeholders, the investment managers at Norfund. And the key reason for that is probably that the key driver for Norfund is really profitable investments, which is also then driving, obviously, sustainability. And you have less the issue of sustainability that you might have in a public funded development project. Although it's worthy to note that when you're doing investments for profit and commercial viability, that can obviously be at odds sometimes with other priorities, such as reaching marginalized groups or taking risks and the additionality concept. In terms of efficiency, a lot going on here. So, but just quickly, so we in order to assess the efficiency, we basically placed Norfund among its peers and looked at it that way. And then we also looked at the renewable energy portfolio within the overall setup of Norfund. Operational expense ratio has been fairly stable, 1%, with this, as you can see here, which is well below its peers. And although we note in the recent years, there's been a buildup of the sort of corporate services within Norfund, which is probably very much needed as it has been growing. Productivity per employee stable, above comparators, as you can see in figure here on the top. And also average number of projects per employee is quite stable and within the range of its competitors. And this is also quite consistent for the renewable energy portfolio. Something worth noting, though, is that we have noticed during the period under review that there has been a decrease in the committed portfolio of Norfund in renewable energy, despite the introduction of the climate investment funds. Main driver for that has been the sale of SM Power, where Norfund has been selling it out to recycle the capital. So it's very difficult to sort of say what is a good or bad ratio. I think it's important to understand the drivers, and we have identified some key drivers, basically of operational costs, such as number of new investments, the development of the pipeline, and obviously if you're working through other platforms to do investments, or if you're doing the investments yourself. And I think maybe with the buildup that we're seeing in the energy department, maybe we haven't seen that translated fully yet in terms of new in a larger portfolio, and that's probably to be seen over the next couple of years. In terms of operational efficiency, I think with that too, we just wanted to highlight that with the sale of SM Power, you've had a buildup of liquidity in Norfund. That's invested in sort of short-term securities and sitting in cash, etc. So I think at the time when we closed the data collection, it was about 13 billion. You could point to that's an underutilization of funds, but I think it's important to also understand the role of Norfund is not to sit and hold assets, but to sell them so that the capital can be recycled for building new infrastructure. And Norfund, as you can see here, I'm not going to go into all the details, but you can see on the left side the sort of plan that's put in place for reinvesting these funds over the next couple of years. And some of this money is shifted into the climate investment fund. In terms of financial performance, I'm not going to go too much into it, but I think some of these numbers are a bit important. You can read more about it in the report. But the portfolio has generated positive returns, I think, since the inception, slightly more than 6%. The average return for the period that we looked at is 4.5. So it's created an average excess return of about 1%. So the renewable energy portfolio is generating returns, but less so than the financial institutions' portfolio. And then Norfund, I guess, have a few loss-making portfolios as well. Maybe what's worth noting is that these are not investments that are sold. So a lot of it is based on book value by Norfund, which is sensitive to assumptions such as discount rates, etc. And there's been quite a volatility in the portfolio for renewable energy. So if you're correcting for risks in it, it's lower but still positive, but well below that of financial institutions. So hopefully, yeah. Anyway, I think that's it. There's a lot more in the report, and hopefully we can get to some of these issues in the discussions. I know Jostein has prepared us for a good discussion, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, for that thorough run-through of the report. Now we will have the comments by Norfund, by their CEO, Mr. Tellef Thorleifsson.
State Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Glad to be here. Having a critical look at our operations and impact is valuable, and hence we really welcome this external evaluation, and particularly the work we're doing in renewable energy. Renewable energy is our largest sector, now about 1/3, and we've been doing it since the very, very beginning of Norfund in 1997. I also have Mark Davies, if you can wave your hand, who's actually in charge of our renewable investments. He's also partly to blame, not just me. He's been active and running this department for many years. As this is such a large part of what we're doing, the evaluation team was given a daunting task to come in and try and make sense of all our comprehensive data and processes, and I want to thank them for the very thorough work. So thank you, Thomas, and your team for really digging deep into this, and also for visiting some of our investees and to really try deeply to understand what we're up against. I'm very pleased to note that the evaluation finds that, firstly, Norfund's investments in renewable energies have a significant development and climate impact. That's important for us. Every year, Norfund spends considerable time and resources on documenting the effects of our investments. We also use this insight when refining our investment strategy, so that's indeed important for us. Secondly, the evaluation identifies our focus on financial sustainability, said differently, profitable investments, as a critical success factor for the strong development impact we can deliver. This validates the relevance of our mandate and approach. So that's also been verified in this report. That being said, it should also be noted that the numbers you've looked at lately has been during COVID, where interest rates have come up, and when interest rates come up, the returns on equity comes down. So it's been a special period. Thirdly, I'm pleased to note that the evaluation finds that Norfund is cost-effective. We've focused on building a lean organization to deliver on our mandate, and when compared to our European peers, Norfund is among, if not the most cost-effective DFI. If you also add the positive financial returns and that we can recycle capital, we are, and I'm maybe not objective, a highly effective tool for Norwegian development policy. The evaluation also provides us with some valuable recommendations, which will help us improve. And it takes too much to go through all of them, but a few things I'd like to highlight. Firstly, that the Climate Investment Fund has proven a success and is in the process of delivering on the ambitions for the fund. And we do agree that we should consider setting higher ambitions for what this fund can achieve. I was warned when I came into Norfund in 2018 that I shouldn't be setting ambitions too high. I came from a private sector who's used to set high ambitions because then we would push more ahead. But I shouldn't do so because then NORAD's evaluation department will come and kick you. So I've been warned against that, but thank you for helping me to push ahead. So we'll be doing that. Secondly, the evaluation also suggests that Norfund should improve the corporate governance framework, and so as to support investment teams to further improve corporate governance for investees. That's something we are constantly working on. For instance, we invest in family-oriented family structures, in various different structures in different countries. So it's not like we can use one template to do the same thing everywhere, but it's something we're working on. Thirdly, you're also arguing that we should document our additionality in investments somewhat better than what we're doing. We've already implemented some changes based on the evaluation, and as such, taken on the recommendation from the report in that regard. Lastly, we're also looking into how we can be even more precise in communicating the impact. You are suggesting we should be looking into or considering attribution. That being said, it's a very complicated matter for those of you in this area. For instance, how do you attribute debt versus equity? How do you attribute coming in early in project development versus coming in late? All these kind of things. So we are explicit when we communicate that it's the total effect of the projects, but still, it's a big topic, and happy to hear you discussing it later today in the debate. There are, however, some areas where we disagree with the evaluators' conclusions and recommendations, and in particular when it comes to the topic of additionality. Because the SIM, and particularly when it comes to the climate investment mandates, where we are to target ODA countries with a high coal intensity, whilst at the same time we shall seek to make investments that would not otherwise have been made. We argue that we have efficient safeguards in place to ensure additionality in every investment, also in markets that's somewhat more mature. That being said, as a minority investor, we're never to do more than 35% normally in a project. We are tasked to be both additional and catalytic, and as such, we're running a constant balancing act. Catalytic means that we should mobilize private funding. So we come in as a minority investor in challenging geographies, and we invest in project development. We do off-grid, on-grid, and in many countries that are quite hard to work. And whilst also we need to team up with other equity providers, we normally have like 1/3 of the equity at the most. We also need to secure the bank financing and the debt. And we have to put all these together. And preferably these should be from private sources so as to mobilize as much as possible. So it's tough to say that we should invest when no one else dares to invest, whilst at the same time we need to bring others with us. If we do it all alone, it would be much easier. But we're not set up to do it alone. We should bring others and preferably private investors. So it's kind of hard to say to an investor, come with us, but no one else dares to invest. So it's finding that balancing act is quite tough. And also these days, unfortunately, we're seeing that the FDI, the foreign direct investment flows to our markets, have been coming down since COVID. Green investments are under pressure, and particularly lately. And the need for our type of funding is larger than ever before. And as such, I wish we could be less additional in many ways, but these days we really need it in what we're doing. So on this basis, as regards additionality, the report suggests some recommendations which are, we feel, somewhat unsubstantiated by the analysis, and which, if implemented, could negatively impact our ability to put our funds to work in viable projects and thereby hamper our ability to generate sustainable returns. So that's an area where we'd like to discuss further. That being said, and despite agreeing on this particular area, we are indeed dedicated to addressing the insights from the evaluation constructively and also in a dialogue with our owner going forward. And before I end, I'd like to thank the NORAD's evaluation department and the KPMG team for a good cooperation during the process, which has lasted for a year and a half. It's been a very comprehensive process. And I look forward to productive discussion and also to learning more through our interaction and the debate coming after this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Telle, for those clarifying remarks and the enthusiasm for being evaluated. Now we will have a short presentation on the recommendations made from the evaluation department in NORAD to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs by Javier Fabra. Welcome, Senior Advisor of the former evaluation department.
Thank you. The Department for Evaluation finds the evaluation report valuable and in line with the overall purpose for this evaluation as outlined in the terms of reference. The report provides useful, insightful comments and inputs into what Norfund has achieved, but also on ways how Norfund can further improve its investments in renewable energy. As you have already heard from the previous speakers, the report finds that Norfund's investments have been significantly important and contributed to increasing renewable electricity production, improving access to electricity, and reducing greenhouse emissions in several developing countries. While the evaluation recognizes positive outcomes, it also highlights some areas where there is possibilities for improvement, as some of which have already been mentioned as well. It has also been mentioned some methodological differences between the evaluation team and Norfund, especially around additionality. However, these differences do not undermine the core findings and key recommendations and value from the evaluation. So based on the evaluation, as well as on our own overall analysis, and not least considering Norfund's status as a special legislation company, the Department for Evaluation has prepared some recommendations for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to consider. So let's take a look at those. First, to engage with Norfund in the ownership dialogue to assess whether the goals and priorities for the Climate Investment Fund should be set at a higher level. And we have also heard about this now, and it seems that there is agreement and follow-up already when it comes to this point. Second, to discuss with Norfund in the ownership dialogue how Norfund assesses the feasibility of investments that can reduce bottlenecks in electricity utilization. Third, to ensure that Norfund's reporting is relevant for assessing its contribution to development and emissions reductions. Again, we have heard about the challenges linked to this, but also the willingness to explore possibilities for improvement. And finally, for the ministry to stay informed about Norfund's assessment of the relevant findings and recommendations and how Norfund intends to take this forward. And today we have, again, heard some of that. So these recommendations have been formally communicated or transmitted to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and are publicly available on NUREC's, so the Department for Evaluation at NUREC website, together with the evaluation report, the Ministry's response to the recommendations, as well as Norfund's comments. So we trust that this report will be valuable in taking this important work that Norfund does forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier, for that to-the-point presentation on the recommendations. And now we are very honored to welcome State Secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Stine Renate Håheim, to share their comments.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for bringing us together here today. The Minister and we took office at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs just 3 weeks ago. And I think we felt a little bit like everyone on their first day at job, a bit nervous, very excited. But this first day on job also had a very serious backdrop. We have a war, we have wars in Africa, we have a very fragile peace in the Middle East, and we have a Russian aggression war on Ukraine. And this week, we woke up to the news that the US had joined forces with Russia and China in the UN Security Council. The world has become a more dangerous place. And rarely has the connection between security policy and development policy been more clear and more important. So in turbulent times, we must stand up for a rule-based world order through our foreign policy. We must pursue a defense policy that ensures our security at home. And we must also pursue a development policy that builds stability and hope. The American freeze on aid has already had catastrophic consequences all over the globe. And we now see countries coming after. We see that there will be cuts in development aid and also a pressure on investment in green energy. Norway will continue to be a predictable and reliable partner, both in terms of standing up for our core values and with investments in development and green energy. And access to clean energy is essential for achieving the sustainable development goals and the 1.5-degree target in the Paris Agreement. According to the International Energy Agency, clean energy investments must reach $4.5 trillion per year by 2030 to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. But as the gap grows between the needs of investment and the actual investments, I think we must think smarter. We need to create jobs while we also cut emissions. We need to contribute to national resource mobilization in the global south, and we also need to mobilize private capital. So, it gives me hope to be here today, because Norfund is a shining example that all of this is possible. Norfund plays a key role in transforming the energy sector to meet the climate targets and unleash the development potential. I may be new to this job, but I have already had the time to be impressed with the way Norfund demonstrates that profitable investments are possible also in challenging markets. And I am not the only one. The way Norfund serve as an inspiration to other investors and have mobilized them to co-invest through the Climate Investment Fund exceeds our expectations. I am therefore pleased that the evaluation concludes that Norfund has achieved significant climate and development effects, that Norfund's investments have contributed to increased electricity production, improved access to renewable electricity, and avoided emission in many developing countries. So, well done. But we also acknowledge that the evaluation raises some critical questions, like how to ensure that Norfund's investments contributes to projects that would not otherwise have been realized, and how Norfund can work more systematically with corporate governance and its investees. Let me therefore say some words about how we intend to take the evaluation forward from the ministry's side. As many of you know, we exercise our ownership in line with the government policy on state ownership and principles for good governance. We do not get involved in individual investments. That is the responsibility of the board. But we do actively exercise our ownership role. The States General's general expectations are outlined in the white paper on ownership policy, including how Norfund should operate responsibly and contribute to accelerating the green transition. With state ownership comes privilege, but obviously also responsibility. Norfund plays a crucial part of Norway's development policy. The total investments portfolio has grown significantly over the years, and only in 2024, its investments reached a total of 7.7 billion Norwegian kroner. Krones? I'm not sure. Scrutiny into how Norfund operates and the results achieved is very important. You are being held to a higher standard, but that is only a testimony to your success. To conclude, this evaluation is important for learning and for knowledge development. We will follow up through the appropriate channels in our ownership dialogue with Norfund. Thank you so much.
Thank you, State Secretary, for those insightful yet somewhat scary comments on the state of the world today, but luckily you ended on a more positive note. As we've seen today, this is a very complex problem or nexus to discuss, and that's why we're so lucky then to have a panel of distinguished participants with us to discuss the findings. The discussion will be moderated by Mr. Jostein Telnes. He's a senior advisor and head of the Knowledge Bank in Norad, and formerly at the Department of Evaluation at Norway. Together with him, we also have Mr. Pål Øystein Bjørdal, who is Deputy Director, Department for Sustainable Development, Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We also have Ms. Ylva Lindberg, Executive Vice President of Strategy and Communication at Norfund. We have Ms. Caroline Andaur, CEO at WWF. And we have Mr. Thomas Fuglesnes, who we heard from earlier today, and who is still Executive Director at the International Development Advisory Services in KPMG, Norway. So, welcome everyone, and I give the word to you, Jostein.
Thank you so much, and good morning everyone. I am very glad to lead this panel discussion, and we've got a report today that has brought up a lot of interesting findings and about a very important company for Norway, and possibly even more important now, given these words by the State Secretary. I know the report may not be so easy to grasp, but it's a lot of different issues that are analyzed and also some technical terms and concepts that all may not be that familiar with. So my aim today is to make sure that we're all together on this, that we'll take it a bit stepwise, and that you all feel that you understand what we are discussing. And if you didn't get all that was said earlier this morning, hopefully you will get on board through this discussion. So, but let me just say a few words. I mean, Norfund is, as we heard, a bit like a special type of company. It's a state-owned company. And it's also a special type of instrument in Norway's development policies. It's an instrument for contributing to development and reduced climate emissions, and then through investments in private companies. So it's expected also to make a profit from these investments. But at the same time, it is supposed to only invest when private investors are hesitant or not necessarily willing. This obviously increases the risks of investments and puts a tough task for Norfund in selecting the right investments, as well as managing these to ensure expected development results are achieved. So the overall question we ask for today is, can development finance institutions as Norfund contribute to both achieving development results, reduce climate emissions, and financial returns? Or to put it, how successfully does Norfund do this? How are really the results of the company today? And in what ways can they be improved? Can we get greater development effects and more reduced climate emissions for the same capital allocated for the company? So again, I'm very glad to have a strong panel here today with representatives of different kind of organizations with different types of roles. And I will very soon ask you, all of you, to give a short comment on that overall question asked, whether Norfund successfully is able to achieve these objectives. But let's first make sure we are all on the same page, right? So Ylva, I would like to ask you to try to explain to us, when Norfund is going to achieve or contribute to development effects, what does that mean really, concretely? And is that supposed to happen? And of course, we heard today there are some countries, there are some possible areas of investing, households, etc. So can you try to kind of give us some types of what you're doing and what does this mean? Thank you.
Thanks very much, and a warm thanks also from me both to the evaluation team and to NORAD's evaluation department and to the MFA. This has been hard work. It's a complex area, and we are all learning from this, which I think is very important. On what are we set up to do? I think very wisely our owner has given us two very distinct mandates. So the development mandate and then the climate mandate. And I think, Thomas, you outlined them really well early on in your presentation because they're set up to do two very different things. And sometimes we are asked to do everything, everywhere, all at once, almost. And that's why it's very important to do what you did, Thomas, and to sort those two. So for renewable energy under the development mandate, we really set up to do two things. So one is on access to energy, where you have things like solar home systems and mini-grids. And WeLight is a company in Madagascar that you looked at, Thomas, which is a very good example of mini-grids. And what the ambition there is to give access to energy to those who don't have energy. And that includes also rural communities. So that's one segment under the development mandate. And then the second one is more large-scale investment, so big solar plants, wind farms, and so on. And that's really about increasing electricity production so that companies can get access to electricity, and then that way that can drive job creation and poverty reduction. So that's another segment. So those two are under the development mandate, access to energy and then electricity production for job creation. And then on the Climate Investment Fund, the ambition is very different because there it is all about avoiding large-scale greenhouse gas emissions. It builds on our experience from the development mandate because we also know that renewable energy production under the development mandate enabled avoided emissions. So by taking that experience and then establishing a new mandate or a new fund, we are then striving to maximize avoided emissions. And that means that you have a slightly different strategy because large-scale emissions reductions can happen only in countries which have large-scale fossil fuel emissions, right? So those are the countries that we're targeting. So 3 distinct segments, 2 under the development mandate, 2 under the climate mandate. And that's, we've actually been envied by some of our DFI colleagues that we have 2 such distinct mandates because it allows us to deliver more effectively on what we're set up to do.
Right, thank you. I hope that helped a bit. But then you mentioned the word segment. And my understanding is also that you can invest also in different types of segments in terms of power production, but also like sometimes also you can invest in grids and this type of. Can you explain what are these other type of segments?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And historically, we've invested a lot in these large-scale IPPs, so large-scale wind and solar. But as the report rightly points out, there are a number of bottlenecks in our markets, which means that even if you then maybe have electricity production, that does not reach where it's supposed to go. And your point on transmission here, which I think is an important one. So we've seen that very much in the same way that the evaluation has, and we've started to make some more investments in that. So we recently did an investment in Copperbelt Energy in Zambia, which is a transmission investment. IndiGrid in India, which is also a transmission investment. So we see that there is a need for that. There is a challenge, though, that in some of our markets, we're not actually allowed as a private sector investor to invest simply because of local legislation and regulation. So in many markets, that is outside of scope. And then also in many markets, energy production is really what is needed the most. So you will see different bottlenecks in different markets, not a one-size-fits-all.
Okay, thanks. So we'll come maybe back to that in terms of the bottlenecks, etc. But okay, so now we kind of have an idea on how you can create development effects through different types of investments and also reduce climate emissions, so be targeting a bit different countries, possibly. Then you're supposed to make a financial return. And this may be obvious for many, but what does that really mean? What is really financial return for in this case?
Yeah. So there are a couple of different reasons for why it is important that the companies we invest in are profitable and why it's possible to make a financial return, right? So one, perhaps the most important one, is companies that are not profitable or companies that don't grow, companies that go bankrupt, they do not have an impact. Not on climate, not on jobs, not on anything. So there is a prerequisite that companies succeed also financially in order for them to have an impact. And the second reason why financial returns are important is, and I think both Thomas and Tellef mentioned this, that we invest together with others. We're a minority investor. So if the investment case is not reasonably attractive, we won't be able to bring others alongside with us. So that's the second reason. And the third reason is, if we invest with decent financial returns, we will also be able to recycle capital. And we'll be able to redeploy that capital into new investments and get a multiplier on our money. So that is why those three reasons are why it's so essential to also have a healthy financial returns from investments. Doesn't mean that we will always succeed on that. Sometimes we will fail, companies will go bankrupt. That's a consequence of the type of risk we're taking. And there will also be a great variation on the types of financial returns that we get in different markets and for different segments.
Okay, thank you. So that was the warm-up, right? Now,
Were you saying I'm the warm-up band?
Yeah, I think you did pretty well. Next time, you can maybe be the main performer. So we are kind of a bit inspired now by the Fredagspanelet, as some of you may be familiar with, where each of the panelists here, they will be given, an opportunity to just give a very short response first, like a yes or no, possibly with some caveat, on one question, and then I will follow up, and we'll go deeper into it. So I will start with you, Thomas. To what extent does Norfund successfully contribute to both development results, reduced climate emissions, and financial returns?
I think that we have documented it quite well, I think, in the report. So I would say probably yes and a but, and maybe I think in terms of yes, I think you see that the portfolio is profitable. But when we're talking about segments, so for instance, the access segment where you're trying to reach marginalized groups, that's quite a difficult market to develop profitable business models. V-Light, which we visited, is one, but to scale it.
Sorry, Thomas, but now you're going far out of your scope or your mandate.
But maybe if I can end, but maybe the question is not the right question. I think what's important is this. I know Talef said that we've been critical on additionality, but you can make profitable investments and produce results, but they might not necessarily be additional. So we visited examples in India.
Sorry, we have to come back. This was not, you know, you will have the opportunity to talk more, right?
All right.
But so if I get you, I know it was yes, maybe, but something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe the question was not exactly as you want, but we come back to that, okay? Caroline, from your side, WWF, 2 sentences.
Yeah, you didn't ask a yes and but, you said to what extent. So if you ask if the question if they're doing that, I would say it's clearly a yes. And then to what extent, which require a much more deeper conversation about, is that there are possibilities to do more, even better. And also, I don't think this is on, maybe.
Maybe you could just very shortly repeat then that it's yes, but...
Yes, they do. To what extent it could have been do more. It can do more also addressing the holistic view on how we make sure that we have both energy access, more production of energy, and lead to development measures all over the kind of the countries where Norfund is investing. And that, I think, point to something that is mentioned in the report.
Sorry, you have to stop
now.
No,
you got longer time. I'm civil society. I don't... but the main point is that in the report, and not mentioned by any of the stakeholders so far, is the need to look at DFIs more in a holistic perspective. So, for example, how is MFA's portfolio? How is their thinking around, for example, energy for development, access to energy, nature-based solution, and so on? That is not mentioned in any of the response, either from the State Secretary, about how you link this to a bigger picture where you can get the added values of DFIs. And I think that is what's really lacking from this conversation, because if you purely look at the DFI, you look at mainly financial results because that's how they're set up, and for development, but look in a bigger picture, you get the true additionality of these investments.
Thank you. Then we'll have to return to that, I think. Ylva, yes or no?
No, it'd be very worrying if I said no now, wouldn't it? Given that they've already said yes. But yes, and financial returns are a prerequisite for us to achieve development effects and climate impact.
Thank you. You have been watching, listening to the radio, I think. Yeah. Paul, lastly, from the MFA.
I mean, it's a yes from me too. My state secretary said yes 5 minutes ago, so I can't really say anything else. But I mean, they take risk. They go into places where others don't go. There's a 30% KPI and going into least developing countries, which they are above. So I think they manage to do both, and they produce a profit on average. So the broad answer is yes.
Thank you.
And work to be done.
But then I would like then to maybe challenge you a bit. You know, you are the owner of this company.
Well, not me, but okay.
No, but on behalf of us. And then, so the company, they got about 10 billion Norwegian kroner, right, in renewable energy, or they invested, I mean, over these years. And then, of course, we see there are development effects, as noted. There are climate, or at least a clear expected reduced emissions. And I mean, but then you as an owner, you don't have set kind of clear expectations on exactly what would be good enough results. And still you are assessing that the results are good. How can you really say that?
Well, I mean, I think it is a dilemma, and you have to kind of weigh this against a lot of metrics to kind of to come to an answer. And I think the good thing about this conversation today and the evaluation that you bring some of these things into the spotlight, and you actually get a real good and broad discussion about it. I mean, I think first of all, judging on what is the right balance is exactly why we set this up Norfund as a separate special company and not as a development entity as such. Because we want it to be something that's driven by financial performance, by financial results, yet with socioeconomic perspectives and requirements to deliver on poverty reduction, job creation, tax income, and so forth. And if you look at the annual reports of Norfund, I believe in 2023, it created something like more than 35,000 jobs through its companies, not attributed, but still, that was 33 million Norwegian kroners in tax revenue. So clearly there's a lot of socioeconomic benefits through the way we set it up. And then there's a lot of dilemmas when it comes to on a project level, in whether you go to Madagascar, whether you go to Malawi, whether you go to India, and so forth. And I think that comes down to a complicated, and it becomes more complicated because we have to distinguish between the mandates, right? We have to see what we actually expect to do through the development mandate, where it's a different approach, where the approach is to have more broader development effects, whereas the Climate Investment Fund, it's more about reducing expected CO2 emissions. So I think that is the reason why we set it up the way, and that's the reason also why the politicians decided they don't want to have a specific number on expected revenues on the investment. Because if we start to do that, I think we get into a very tricky discussion about what is the balance between job creation and socioeconomic benefits, and what is a sound return. Because I think you can also see the wider discussion about, and you see it even here in domestic politics, about private profits in the development sphere, right? So we have to find the right balance, and I think we have a requirement for Norfund to be sustainable, to create profitable businesses, and I think that is sufficient. And then we have appointed a board, and they have appointed an administration and CEO to deliver on the mandates with those kind of broad and general objectives. And I think that is, for us, works well. And I think that it's actually also a part of the success, why we've come so far and why it's delivering so well, because we have this model.
No, thank you. Ylva, I'll see you had, but I'll just have to ask the owner here just first, when we are you mentioned the board. And they are trusted, right, on behalf of the owner to make sure the company sets its right targets and has the right strategies. And then we learn from the evaluation that the ambitions for the climate investment mandate, or how they operationalize this internally, they have been achieved, after just 2 years. Although not so much of the capital, just a third of the capital has been invested. So the question is, how as an owner do you assess the work of the board then, in terms of making sure that the ambitions here are sufficient?
I mean, it's always kind of a tricky balance, and of course, if you and Telef, I think, alluded to it, if you set too low targets and you overachieve them, you haven't been sufficiently ambitious. If you set too high and achieve them, you haven't been realistic, or you haven't been good enough. So it's a bit of a kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't discussion. But I think ambition is important, and especially on climate in these times. And I think it's a key kind of instrument we have established here is the Climate Investment Fund. And we must remember, it was established in 2022. So in the space of investment and so forth, it's not a very long time. And I think at the time when it was established, this is kind of what we knew and what the expectations were. And it helped us to actually overachieve our climate financing goals before time of our 2026 goals set in Glasgow. But I think in hindsight, yes, we have to look, and Baku set very ambitious new goals, and that's kind of the hard discussion now, how do we achieve them? And clearly Norfund and the Climate Investment Fund has to be a part of that solution. That's what we have to discuss with Norfund, and which will be a big discussion within the greater Norwegian society as well, how to kind of get to that. It's going to be a difficult one, but clearly we need private sector financing in that.
Thanks. Possibly we get an opportunity to get back to that as well. I mean, in light of potential need for more mobilization of private capital. But then, Ylva, please, would you like to add something?
Yeah,
and then
very briefly, 2 points. So one is on the governance model that Paul described pretty well, that there's a very clear division of labor between what the Ministry of Foreign Affairs does as an owner, the board, and the management. And I think this is part of why we have been able to deliver the results described in the report, that it's clear who does what? So what are the roles and responsibilities between the owner, the board, and the management team? Where there's a clear mandate in the form of the Norfund Act and a set of instructions set by the owner, and then the board is appointed by the owner, designs the strategy, monitors to what extent the organization delivers on the strategy, and then, if there's a mismatch, that's then reviewed. So I think that works incredibly well, rather than it being, you get a signal from the owner saying, we would like you to do this particular investment, right? You're very clear, Paul, that that's not what you're doing. And I think that would jeopardize the model that we have. So that's one thing. And then on ambitions, I used to be a consultant in my former life, and the piece of advice there was always to under-promise and over-deliver, right? So maybe that is what we've been doing here as well to a certain extent. But I think the point is well taken, and it is something that we need to look at. What should the ambitions be? And should we be stretching ourselves a little bit more in order to achieve even more?
Thank you. I would then, so Carolina, you would like to comment on this, and then also we have to go back a bit to, I think, this issue of the bottlenecks and potential greater development effects, potentially, if we look at the Norfund in a larger perspective. But Caroline first, yeah?
Yeah, in terms of the ambition, I think the only right thing to do, where we have the description of where we are, on kind of general bilateral aid is going down, we need investments is going down in Africa, for example, related to solar energy, the ambition should be set higher. But you shouldn't be punished for setting high ambitions. And I think that's what is kind of particular in companies that is reporting, for example, to the state. That is quite clear that it's a risk of setting high ambitions, because in the public you are then not delivering. So my board chair won't, if I reach my ambition 100%, that's actually not a good result. It's a bad result because we weren't ambitious enough. So getting that acceptance also from the owners and the public on the stretch goals, because it's an ambition, is needed, but also because the world needs it. This is what we need to do. And I think that's very often forgotten. This discussion comes back to the narrow mandate discussion we have around this here in Norway. It's why we are doing that, and then we need to have higher ambitions.
Thank you. Then I would like to go to you, Thomas. Caroline, she mentioned this element initially, that potentially there could be, let's say, greater development effects out there if we were able to see Norfund in relation also to other types of, let's say, support or elements that could enable these effects. So that is also discussed a bit in the report, as far as I understand. And would you say something a bit about that, what that means, and what Caroline suggested that we should discuss this more? What would that mean?
Now I can speak a bit longer, right?
But not too long now.
Okay. No, I think there are a lot of examples too where this is happening in the portfolio of Norfund. But we call it coincidental. I think it was pointed out by the Auditor General in 2014 that there's no overall strategy for renewable energy in Norway and how the various tools work together. But we have found examples. One that gets mentioned a lot is Mokuba in Mozambique, where the embassy provided funding for the transmission line for the investment of Norfund. There is also the use of these tools at NORAD in terms of project preparation facility that's used by many of the investees. And indeed also I think RELIKE gets money from other sources of soft funding that's not even Norwegian. Our role was not really to review the mandate. We didn't really review the coherence of all these. So I think there could be room for opportunities, but we haven't reviewed it. I think in segments such as, for instance, where you want to reach marginalized groups off-grid, I think what we found and what probably Norfund has found already, it's really hard to establish scalable business model. And unless you're working in a context or a country where the enabling environment is quite predictable, you have clear policies and tariffs and maybe subsidies. So clearly, I think harnessing the wider ecosystem is important. But whether that should be tied to Norfund or not, I don't probably think so. I think the guarantee that's put up right now is a good example that's available to anyone, including Norfund.
Thanks. I see several has raised their hands. But my struggle is then, okay, so Norfund, as they were explained here, it's an autonomous unit. I mean, they should really focus on, the investments in private companies, make profit. And then you kind of say that we should somehow coordinate it with something else, or to make sure. So what should really happen now then, if there's a potential here, and maybe now the risk, for Norfund has increased when you rely on some other things to happen in countries if there is a cut in aid, right? So maybe your result risk has kind of really increased, and that we really need to think about these things now. But so maybe can you explain to, I don't know who should come first now, Ylva or Paul, but can you clarify a bit on us? How can we think about this Norfund versus other types of development support?
Yeah, I think it's an important point that we should always work with partners, and we do, right? Because Norfund doesn't go in and fix this on our own. So in every project we have a local partner. We are sometimes together with other DFIs. Sometimes there are other NGOs in and supporting on improving, say, climate or gender, or so in every project you have different kinds of partners. So I think that's essential. We won't be able to deliver without that. What I would be reluctant to do is to have sort of command and control type of system from Norway, where you say that in renewable energy we should have this constellation of Norwegian players going after this particular opportunity. For us to sit here in Norway and think that we're able to design those kinds of solutions for the very complicated settings that we work in, I think that's just naive, to be frank. So what we need to do is to deliver solutions and investments and collaborations based on the needs in those markets for those countries and for the companies that receive support, rather than designing them in a sort of vacuum in Oslo. Or in Førde. I think that's, I understand the desire to coordinate and collaborate, but I think we need to be very careful so that we ensure that we design solutions that truly work for the markets that we operate in. In many of our investments, it's incredibly valuable to have different kinds of sources of funding, to have a DFI player, to have a local bank, to have the local entrepreneur, to have grant-based funding from multinational or Norwegian sources. But that needs to be designed based on that particular project and those particular needs in that country, and not in a centralized way.
Thanks. Paul, would you like to add?
Just to add, I think I largely agree with Ylva here. This is part of a larger ecosystem. This is part of an international system, and of course, Norway can only do so much kind of into design this. But I think what you say, yes, there are, let's say, ad hoc examples. I wouldn't say they're non-coincidental because they're part of the same system. So when the embassy invests in a project where actually we've seen Norfund, there is a strategic alignment, and there have been. It happens for a reason. It happens for a reason. Norad has invested in, for example, or supported Scatec in scoping certain projects where we know that, and then Norfund has come in. I think there's an example in South Africa of this. On financial inclusion, this is not the topic of today, but you have other examples where you see the same. So it is happening. And it's happening within the Norwegian system without the kind of a grand strategy. And I think sometimes that's also the bit of the beauty of it, that we don't detail too much. And this comes back to the governance system as well. That if we start to kind of decide that Norfund needs to go there because the rest of the system has decided, then we start kind of putting us at risk of this financial sustainability and that role. And just say, we have to also be smart about coordination globally, because, there's a lot of work done on global coordination on these things that we need to be a part of, but we need to make sure it's smart and that it's just not for the purpose of thinking that we'll be better coordinated and knowing that it will actually achieve better results, because we have to be sure of that.
Thanks. I would like to then go a bit back to you, Thomas, on this issue, how Norfund really could achieve greater development effects. Because if I understand your report, it's a bit like that you're saying that on several areas, Norfund could be potentially invest a bit more in countries or markets with greater needs. They could, in some investments, maybe have not done it. They could be, that they were not necessarily additional. Or at least that the systems around it could potentially be better, which is, in terms of the analysis. So, is that correct? How would you say that Norfund potentially could achieve greater development effects, to put it like that?
Well, I think my answer to your question earlier, it's that additionality, and I don't want to make Mark's job more difficult. I know it's difficult. I lived 14 years in Africa, and it's very difficult to do these investments. But I think Norfund always need to strive to be additional. So you cannot invest in a low-risk market, in a low-risk segment, using a low-risk capital. So, for instance, you can still find, I think we highlighted India as one of the sort of markets that's quite active right now. But you can, I think Norfund has demonstrated that you can do transmission. During our conversations on the ground, we picked up that battery storage for making intermittent solutions such as solar and wind more effective. So I think in each context, you kind of need to make sure that you have the right framework in place to make sure that you're doing additional investments and crowding in the private sector and not out. And I think that's the sort of, I don't think there's a binary yes, no returns or not. And then I think we need to be honest. I know the numbers are really high reported on household connections. So in fact, maybe you should put more money on that if you want to sort out the access issue in Africa. But I think behind it, it's very difficult to make it work. Norfund has worked. I think the V-Light is a good example where you bring together Norfund's development finance expertise and years of experience in the sector with a private investor and I think a French technology company, and there's a model biz. And they want to take it to scale elsewhere as well. But I know in many of the countries where I worked, it will be very difficult because it costs money to make profitable business out of it. The tariffs are too low. There are willingness or affordability to pay. So for that, you need access to grant funding. So maybe wildcard to put it out there is maybe you need a sort of blended fund or something to help those sort of investments. That doesn't need to be directed from how it works from Norway, and there are funds out there that you can piggyback, but you need to find the money for it.
I got some questions from the audience, and we will not manage many more. But if there should be some final, please just use your the QR code. Ylva, I'll let you respond very shortly, because there are many issues I know. But Caroline, if you would like to say something, and maybe there's one comment here, and then it's particular for you. Maybe you could add it on. That what do you think really could be done differently for Norfund or for DFIs, kind of in a bigger picture?
Well, first, in kind of the blended finance thinking is kind of where we are discussing in the world now around these things, because we see that's what's needed, because it's a lot of much now as a pointing game. We can't do that. We can't address bottlenecks because this is missing. We can't be responsible for that, and we end up having can't prove additionality. And the risk is there then we don't invest, which we also see in certain places of Africa. There are de-investments when we know it should be invested more. So how we get that balance right is critical, and a lot of DFI is working on this much more actively than we do here in Norway, and it's a good environment for discussing that now. And I think that's the exactly example of kind of how you think value chain around this, which is not we have also talked about in terms of, if we do that in Norway even, kind of how do you set our electricity, kind of what are we using our offshore wind to, what are we using our onshore wind to? It's the lack of value chain thinking. It's exactly the same. It's no different here in Norway than in Africa, but we have different mechanisms how to sort it out and different tools to do it. In terms of kind of what Norfund could added, could be kind of the key thing change. I will go back then looking a little bit to the mandate actually that was created in 1997, which has been adjusted a little bit. But also when you look at the CMI, the Climate Investment Fund, I think we have to make sure that we address the triple crisis that we have. Otherwise, you actually make more harm. You may end up making more harm, which is addressing the nature crisis, the climate crisis, and the inequality crisis, as we see as well in many, particular in developing countries. So addressing the triple crisis is another development that we could see.
So we are running a bit out of time. Ylva, you have the opportunity to comment a bit on here. I just let also mention here, of course, that somebody has asked, what does these recent aid cuts now mean? And also how potentially in the US that the DFI there has not been, let's say that it's been, it does not necessarily now have to link it to, if I understand it, to the development goals. Its investment. So maybe that has some implications also for the credibility of DFIs. So this was a lot to you, but now you can.
I'll try to just briefly some reflections of what you said, Thomas. I completely agree. Any and all investments made by Norfund must be additional. And that is what we're set out to do. And we're also glad that the evaluation has not found any investments that haven't been additional. And then, of course, we take on board the challenge that we can improve, maybe especially in our qualitative assessments of how we view this. So that is something that we'll look at. Also, private sector investments are not always the right tool to solve a problem. And you alluded to rural communities, where it's very difficult to find a business case. In those cases, in those extreme, maybe not extreme, but in some of those cases, maybe there shouldn't be private sector investments. Maybe it's better to do grant-based funding. So I don't think Norfund can solve any and all problems. We need to do what we're good at in the segment that is relevant for private sector finance. We will be additional in different ways in different types of investments. So in a least developed country like Mozambique, where we did Mucuba that you spoke to, that is additional in a very different way from a transmission investment in India. And that's right for us because we need to have a diversified portfolio with different profiles of risks for different kinds of investments. Then finally, to your point on blending, Thomas, I think it's a good one. And there's a lot of talk about blending, a lot of new initiatives, not all of them good, to be frank. Sometimes they do more crowding out than they do crowding in. We need to be careful about that. We have a small, what we can call blending facility, which is called Frontier Facility. And with that, we can do more project development. We can do first loss, that kind of thing. That can absolutely be scaled up and used more. So point taken on that one. On the very big question about the developments we're seeing in the US now, and if we zoom in on DFC, which is our sister organization, it is still not clear what's happening. I think for USAID, it has been much more dramatic. For DFC, what we are hearing that we're likely to see is partly a reorientation to America first, so making America stronger, safer, and more prosperous. We are already seeing that coming through in some requests from DFC to our portfolio companies. How does this serve American interest? We're also seeing some investments being put on hold. So that is one development. There is also a conversation of setting up a sovereign wealth fund in the US, and potentially that DFC could somehow be a part of that. We don't know what will happen, but that is something that's being talked about. And then a detail, perhaps, not a detail from an ethical standpoint, but more very specific, is on reproductive rights, where the Mexico City policy on anti-abortion and not using any form of USAID to promote reproductive rights and abortions. That is something that does exist in some investment agreements today, and we can potentially expect it to become much more top of mind going forward. And that will, of course, be dramatic.
Thank you, Ylva, and for handling all these issues at the end. I hope that or satisfied some of the questions that came. We are unfortunately not able to continue, although I would very much like to do. I mean, obviously there are hopefully some takeaways here. I mean, in terms of, I think with this discussion about potentially, the other types of, let's say, development support that needs to somehow work well together, at the same time respecting the the special type of instrument that Norfund is, and making Norfund good at doing what it's doing in terms of, now we're talking about renewable energy, of course. I hope you also got a bit wiser on how this works, and then that maybe the discussion can continue. So big thanks to the panelists. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Jostein, and thank you again, all panelists here. As we discussed earlier, it's a very broad and complex topic, and it was very suitable for the panel discussion as well, to get an insight into all these nuances which cover this area. It's up to me to close off this event now for today. I just want to thank and very much appreciate the work of the evaluation team from KPMG for carrying out this very complex and challenging evaluation. They have produced a solid report with key findings that could lead to real improvements in this field. We also want to thank the team at Norfund for cooperation throughout this process, as well as colleagues at the Foreign Ministry and NORAD. And least but not last, for everyone attending today, both here and online, and looking forward to seeing you in the future and continuing these great discussions. Thank you.